Welcome to the first Lincoln Project Town Hall of 2022. We made it. We're on the eve of January 6th. It's a day that changed everything, as we all know. We're incredibly excited that you're here with us. As you can see, our co-founders, Rick Wilson, Reed Galen, and senior advisors, Stewart Stevens and Joe Trippi. Hi, guys. Hello. Unprecedented times require an unprecedented pro-democracy coalition. So I'm incredibly excited because we have the best political minds, which can design and implement a strategy that gives democracy a fighting chance. What's interesting to me is a year ago, like after the Lincoln Project, historians like Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Trump himself, and actually many of you warned Trump was not about to go gently into that night, like not even kind of. Like the GOP was plotting to stop the steal long before January 6th. I used to get the texts. They were pretty crazy. They egged on their followers with violent rhetoric about defending what belonged to them and them alone, right? Like political violence was imminent. It was almost inevitable. Like you could feel it. It was palpable. Trump himself actually said, if you remember this, we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and we are going to the Capitol. And they did. Like thousands of Trump supporters. They formed a mob, yes, an actual mob, and then attacked the Capitol building to stop the certification of the presidential election. Now, many of us wondered, was this it? Right? Is this it? Is this the moment the US breaks out into civil war? Is this the moment Trump will cement his march towards autocracy? But then something unexpected but predictable happened. We went on about our lives. Like we all had kids to take care of, jobs to work, we went to dinners, we celebrated Valentine's Day. Like we all didn't just witness a coup attempt. Like we all didn't just witness a sitting president urge his supporters to march to the Capitol and take back America. Like that's crazy. I almost did too. On January 6th, I was actually about to teach a comedy class. And 14 days later, I was due to perform at a school in rural South Carolina. And actually I canceled for safety reasons. And I did, and they understood why. Because in the America that the GOP and Trump want to create, like this not so distant dystopian future. I don't know if you've checked out the latest Lincoln Project ad, but people like me, we don't get to speak up. Like not safely anyway. And, you know, we saw what happened in Florida just this week when an activist tried to make their voice heard, they were arrested. So I didn't do that comedy show. Instead, I joined the Lincoln Project and I joined the fight. So many of you have been in this fight for much longer. Many of you are new to this, but we are all in it because we want to live in a democracy. Democracy is on the ballot now. According to a political article, it just came out today, at least 57 people who were at that riot, some who were even arrested, are running for office. People on the wrong side of history trying to make that our future. It's insane. So that brings us to right now. Yeah, it's a shit show right now. So that's where we begin. Stewart Stevens, I'll let you take it away.
Wow, Maya, I'd actually prefer if you just kept talking. If you guys don't watch Maya on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock, or you can catch it afterwards anytime, when we're speaking, you're really missing something. It's really a tremendous, always different show. Thank you guys for being here. By way of introduction, my name's Stewart Stevens. I was one of these Republican media consultants. I started a Republican media consulting firm back in the early 90s. I've been doing this long enough. I was telling Reed that I worked with his dad. And I helped elect Republican governors and senators in over half the country. I worked on 5 presidential campaigns, some winning, some losing. Last campaign I worked on was Mitt Romney. And a lot of people are wrong about 2016, but it's really hard to find anybody who was more wrong than me. I famously said I didn't think Donald Trump would win a primary. That didn't work out so well. And I didn't think that he'd win the general. And when he did, I really had to ask myself, how did this happen? Why didn't I see this? And that ultimately led me to write this book called It Was All a Lie: How the Republican Party Became Donald Trump. And the first sentence in it is blame me, because You know, people can write books. It's sort of a Washington trope. How come they didn't listen to me? I couldn't write that because they did listen to me. And I was part and parcel of what the party had become. I had to kind of come to grips with that, or try to come to grips with it. And as bleak a portrait of that party as I wrote, which came out a couple of years ago, I realize now I was still way over optimistic. I never thought that we would be where we are today. And I think that one of the situations that we find ourselves in is, how do we talk about this without seeming alarmist, but still be truthful? It's like a pandemic. I think whatever we say at the beginning is going to sound alarmist, and at the end is going to prove inadequate. I don't know what we can do except try to get everyone that we know. And this is really one of these things, like we say in elections, you know, vote and bring two people. We have to convince people of the urgency of this moment. There's a great lust for normalcy out there. I totally get that. We have a normal president. Things kind of look normal, but we can't escape from the reality that millions and millions, 70, 80 million Americans believe that we don't have a legally elected president, which means we live in an occupied country. And that's what they're going to teach their children. And how do you deal with that? What does that mean? We haven't had a moment like that since 1860. So I think in these situations, I know that one of the questions, you know, that always comes up is, well, how are we going to win? And I think it's important to talk about that. But they're fights you get in not because you know you're going to win. You get in fights, the best fights, because you know you have to fight. And that's where we are now. And everybody on this call has helped. We'll continue to fight. I'd like to say we know how this ends up, but I don't think honestly we can. I mean, the fact that we're the world's oldest democracy is both inspiring and chilling. What happened to the rest of them? But I think we can win. And I think that the way to win is to try to win every day and to try to convince other people that we can win. And there's more of us than them. And we just have to remind ourselves of that and keep fighting every day.
Yeah, I think we have to pace ourselves, but we have to pace ourselves with urgency in 2022, Stewart. I think, you know, hearing from you, knowing that we don't want to alarm people, but we also need to sound the alarm. I kind of want everybody waking up every day going, how do I save this democracy? What do I do? Like that's kind of what I need, that kind of, Rick, want to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
Well, Maya, thanks for doing this tonight, and everybody else for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your support, your attention, and your focus on you know, a few years ago I would have thought this was over the top to say this, but we appreciate you being on the team that's trying to save American democracy. We're no longer a country of watchers and people who can afford to look at politics idly or afford to leave it in the background. It's now the fight of our future. It is now something that, you know, we're not just going to go to a November election day and maybe your tax rate will be 36.2% or 38.4%. It's not that anymore. Now it's a choice between, does this republic continue as the world's most successful experiment in democratic liberty and freedom based in a constitution and rule of law, or does it descend into something that is authoritarian, that is directed only at the retention and acquisition of pure power, at a political culture that's based on cruelty and excess and racial animus? Or are we going to go and try to save this country from the folks that have a plan and a very clear strategic vision on how to break it? And so I'm very grateful for everybody's support and attention, like I said. So I want to talk about a couple things really quickly about sort of where we see first the January 6th situation, and secondly talk a little bit more broadly about what we'll be doing in the first quarter of this year to sort of shape the battlefield for 2022. So first off, obviously 1/6 has you know, it is looming. We will soon be at this 1-year anniversary of what I view as one of the darkest moments in American history. There have been 3 massive attacks on the U.S. Capitol planned in the last 100 years. There was an attack in the 1950s by Puerto Rican separatists, small scale. Al-Qaeda planned to strike the Capitol with Flight 93. And Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, Roger Stone, Alex Jones, Ali Alexander, and a host of other people, including the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and others, engaged in a broad conspiracy to overthrow a legitimate small d democratic election in this country. That attack was in many ways successful. And what we're trying to tell people right now is you cannot sleep on how corrosive an unpunished coup attempt will be for the future of this country. You're already seeing the Republicans trying to rewrite history. You know, they insist on calling it the Capitol protest. They insist on blaming imaginary demons like Antifa or BLM for organizing it. They blame the FBI. This fantasy world that they live in, though, is a powerful bubble. And you all, every one of you on this call has your uncle or your cousin or your mom or your dad or somebody that you know that watches Fox all day. And they are convinced that Donald Trump is the tallest, handsomest man in the room in any circumstance, and that the attack on the Capitol was a false flag operation. It was not. But they're going to try to rewrite history. And one of the things we knew that would happen this week is everybody would be out there making their ads about the attack. And look, we could have made a 1-6 ad that showed what everybody else is going to show. The guy with the horns, the cops getting beaten and savaged by these monsters, beaten with flagpoles, beaten with fire extinguishers, beaten with their own shields, threatened with, people yelling, get their gun. We could have done that ad. We could have shown you the guy with the Confederate flag. We could have shown you the scumbags with their feet up on the desk in the Senate. We could have done that. But instead, we put out a piece today called Closer Than You Think, because we want people to understand how, because we kind of are all experts here on how the right wing thinks. Our former tribe, we still understand how they think. And so we put out this piece today called Closer Than You Think. It's on our webpage. It's on our YouTube channel. It's on our Twitter feed. It's pinned on the top of my Twitter feed. If you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to watch it. It's the first of a series that looks forward to what happens if we don't fight back in 22 and in 24. If we don't face up to this authoritarian movement, to these Republicans that are seeking to burn down the right to vote in states across this country. They've passed voting rights restrictions now in 32 states. We have got to be on that game every day. Chuck Schumer needs help when he brings that voting rights bill to the floor next week. We're going to have to help with that. All these things that we're going to do are framed in this new ad series about 1-6, because if we don't understand the magical thinking that they engage in, if we don't understand the reality bubble that they live in, we won't fight them effectively. And we also want to tell people, this is not a hopeless fight, but it's a fight. If you're not in it, if you're not thinking about it every day, if you're not focused on how you're going to protect and preserve your democracy, they will first come for your voting rights. Then they will come for your civil rights. Then they will come for you. This is the pattern of authoritarianism over time. It never varies. It is always, whether it's Nazism or Soviet communism or authoritarianism today in Hungary or China or elsewhere, it will always work the same way. If we're not ready for that fight, you're gonna find out how quickly things can fall apart. So as we move into the first part of the year, the first quarter of this year, and I'll slow down here in a second and turn it over to my colleagues, we're going to focus on several things. First, we're going to keep describing to Americans what the stakes are in defending democracy. There are a lot of people, God bless them, on our Democratic allies side who say, oh, the issue for 2022 is prescription drugs and Build Back Better. It's not. I'm sorry. Unless you understand that this fight, just as 2020 was only about Trump, all the other stuff was decoration. 2022 is going to be about our democracy. It is going to be about whether or not America continues as a republic or whether it slips into authoritarianism. And folks, it will happen fast if it slips. The day the Republicans take back the House is the day that Joe Biden's impeachment hearings start. And Speaker Jim Jordan begins those hearings that day. The day that happens is the moment that the 2024 election leans in Donald Trump's direction much more heavily than any of us would like. And it's going to be a harder lift. So we'll be working to make sure people keep alert and attentive and understand the risks, understand the stakes, understand what's at hand. We'll also be working again on our corporate responsibility campaign. That campaign is going to be directed in a large measure at making sure that companies that are now pouring money back into Republicans, even though they swore they wouldn't after the insurrection, are held to account. We did a lot of work with that on Toyota this year. We did a lot of work with that on AT&T, JetBlue, and others during the course of the last year. Excuse me. We'll be back on that track very heavily this year because people need to be held to account, and the people that are providing the infrastructure to the insurrection need to be held to account. And those folks will be under our spotlight as we go forward as well. And as we move into the year, we're going to talk much more about the races we'll be involved in. We're very excited about Senate, House, and governor's races across the country. And we'll be breaking those out a little more thoroughly as we go forward to give you a perspective on where we think the fights are going to be, the most critical, where your activism and your participation can be the most important. And with that, I will turn it over to Maya again. And
Thank
she can pass it on, and now I will take a drink.
You deserve a drink after that. I think we all do. That was an incredibly intense description of the work that is ahead of us. And I think it's time for everyone to realize it's time to come off of autopilot. We absolutely cannot save this democracy without everybody's involvement. And so the more you can share the messages, get the word out, and have those tough conversations with people, the better, because like Rick said, it's sometimes the relatives and the friends and the family who are sitting there getting brainwashed day in and day out. We need you talking to them and sharing that information with them. All right, next up, we have Joe Trippi. You're a Democrat. What are you doing here?
Hey, Maya, thanks for doing this. And thanks everybody for joining us. Look, for me, January 6th, was a day I woke up and having done battle for 30 or so years with the likes of Stewart Stevens and Rick and others who, the Lincoln Project, I just realized immediately that this isn't a fight between Republicans and Democrats. It's not a fight between right and left. This is in that all those past battles, maybe we'll have them again someday in the future, but hopefully after we've retired or something, but don't matter. None of it matters, because this is a fight against anti-democratic authoritarian party versus a pro-democracy coalition. It has to be that. And that means it can't, as a Democrat, yeah, I want to be part of the Lincoln Project, because part of what I think, and we've talked about, is growing a pro-democracy coalition from the ground up, not waiting for Garland or the filibuster to get killed. I mean, we'll fight for those things, but in the end, this has got to come from the ground up. It's got to be a pro-democracy movement to fight this. I mean, we've got to use the technology that's coming from the Dean campaign and building that movement. Use a lot of those tools that are much more powerful now, and combine it with the content and the ability to get in the heads and take on the tough fight that needs to be taken on. The Lincoln Project's, that's what drew me to them. Aside from being hammered upside the head and winning some but losing some with them, I think this is the place in 2022 that is going to turn the page on this. It's not, I don't think we can count on committees in Washington. I mean, I've been involved in all that stuff. No, they're not. They won't have to govern, and at the same time, a lot of those candidates are going to have to appeal to a lot of voters who still live in a world where they think there's two parties and we have to work across party lines. And those candidates have to project that kind of message. They're going to be not willing to take the fight the way it needs to be taken. And the only people who can do that, in my view, Lincoln Project, not owned by any special interests, not have to be worried about who votes for us or who doesn't, to go out and do that. But I think critically, what I wanted to help do is build a grassroots movement with the hundreds of thousands, the millions out there of you watching, help us grow this movement. It's simple. People are, what can we do? Well, what you can do is find one more friend, one more coworker, one neighbor, and tell them to join us, to join the pro-democracy coalition that we intend to build. And we're going to do more and provide a lot of tools out there for people to take action and take the fight straight to taking out this authoritarian movement that's out to destroy our democracy.
Thank you, Joe. That is incredibly helpful. It makes sense that you are here. Again, unprecedented times call for unprecedented teams. And so it is incredible to have you on board. And again, as Joe said, yes, we need everybody's involvement. And that means, you know, sharing our content, watching our shows. We have incredible guests on our shows, you know, historians, authors, people who have really done the hard work of understanding and creating frameworks that will help move us forward. And so it can inform you, and then you can take the information that you get from those shows and use that to have conversations. And so it's not just knee-jerk reactions to things that you're seeing on Twitter. It's actual information that you can use, because hopefully facts still matter. I hope. We're going to go to Reed now. Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Hello.
Hey, Maya, thanks. And thanks to Joe and Stewart and Rick as well, and to the thousands of you who've joined us this evening. I hope everybody had a safe and healthy holiday season and is trying their best to have a happy new year. I know all of us are dealing with all of the situations we once couldn't imagine. We now take it one day at a time. Listen, folks, you know, there's a lot of, you know, if you read what I will call the mainstream media, 2022 is already over. The Republicans have won. They've taken the U.S. House. They've taken the U.S. Senate. They're going to destroy American democracy, and there's nothing we can do about it. That is horseshit, and it is not true, right? As Joe noted when we were talking last night, and David Wasserman, who's one of the closest Congress watchers, reported this morning, there's been a lot of this talk about how Republicans have used redistricting as a weapon to ensure that they're going to win in 2022. It turns out, actually, that the Democrats have done a pretty good job of not only holding serve, but also keeping those seats even, pretty close to even anyway. Does that make it easy? No, nothing worth doing in life is easy, and certainly a president's first midterm election historically has been pretty tough. But there are different things happening than there were even a few weeks ago. The economy, despite what anybody says, is roaring. People are going back to work. Now, a lot of people are leaving work, but that's because we have a dynamic economy in which people can move jobs. That's the sign of a healthy economy, not an unhealthy economy. The Republicans have a lot to answer for. They have a lot to answer for on COVID, on vaccines, on booster shots, on the laws they've passed in states, not only on voting, but also on privacy issues, engendering vigilantism among states, turning citizens on one another. They call themselves the party of life. They are not. They are the party of death. They are the party of chaos. They have no interest in governing. They have no interest in you, me, or the people they purport to speak for, right? They will be held to account for each and every one of those things. And we will be at the forefront, as we were in 2020, to do those things. Now, how are we going to do that? And then we'll take our questions. First is, over the course of the next weeks and months, we will push a national narrative. Gang, this election, as Rick said, is not about policy, right? As Joe said, it's not about policy. It's not about internecine fights in Washington, D.C. with language no one can understand. It's about democracy. That's what this fight is about. It's about democracy first, second, third, and the rest of the way down the line. And we are going to ensure that every voter in this country who is available to us understands that and understands just what it means for them, right? That's what we're going to do. It is not patriotic to take an AR-15 and stand on a street corner and menace your fellow citizen. It is not patriotic to say, I am not going to encourage or provide vaccines to my citizens, thereby making sure that my schools are screwed up and my hospitals are jammed to the gills. It is not patriotic to ensure that people cannot live their lives the way they want to. It is nationalistic and it is authoritarian. We will take back patriotism. The American flag belongs to everyone, not to one group of people who say it's my flag and I'm a patriot. That's bullshit, and we will tell people that, and we will push back on that narrative. Secondly, we, as Joe noted, will build the broadest, deepest, most unique, most diverse coalition in American political history. It happened ad hoc in 2020 to help Joe Biden be elected. We will do it intentionally now. In the states where we are going to fight, in places like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona and Nevada and Florida and Texas, we will work with anyone and everyone there who is dedicated to the pro-democracy cause. There is no litmus test to work with us in this. If you are interested in ensuring that American democracy survives, join us, sign up. Next, we're going to hold corporations to account. There are a whole bunch of companies after January 6th who said they weren't going to give any more money to members who voted to overturn the election a year ago. Most of them have gone back on their word. Are you surprised? No, and I'm not surprised either, and we collectively aren't. We will make sure that every one of those companies who's gone back on their word, companies like AT&T and Boeing, are held to account. As you all probably know, there's a lot of things that CEOs really don't like. Being held up as a paragon of authoritarianism is something they really don't like. And we're going to do it each week, week in and week out. We're going to make people famous. There's already incredible work being done in this space, and we will add to that in a consistent and effective manner. And lastly, the stuff that we did when it came to things like Donald Trump and getting inside his head, we will do in these individual races. We will find our opponent, the person who is the anti-democracy candidate, and most of the time, in fact, all of the time, near as I can tell, that's going to be the Republican, whether or not it's in a Michigan governor's race or an Ohio U.S. Senate race. And we will do what we do to them, which is we will climb inside their head, we will make them crazy, we will make them turn towards us, and we will fight them on the ground we know how to fight on, that other people can't or won't, and make sure that the person, the pro-democracy candidate, a guy like Tim Ryan in Ohio or a woman like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, has all of the time, resources, and messaging necessary to ensure that they can be victorious in November. I want to say thank you to everybody out there. If you're willing, I would be asking you to do us a favor tonight. We don't ask this on these things very often, but this is what I'm asking for tonight. I'm asking for you to go to lincolnproject.us/donate. Give $1, give $5, give $10, give what you can. Every dollar counts. We have nearly 1 million individual contributors. Guys, this is not an organization funded solely by people who write $6 and $7 seven-figure checks. 80% of the money we raise comes from people like you, individual Americans who have said enough is enough, who are looking for someone to stand up for the country, the Constitution, the rule of law, and for fuck's sake, common decency. And that's what we do all day, every day. I could not be prouder to be here with you all tonight. I could not be prouder of the group of people I get to work with. And with Maya, I think we'd be happy to take questions.
Yes, we have questions from all of you. And so, but before we get to the questions, I do want to just thank everybody who spoke, because Reed, Rick, Stewart, Joe, as you laid out this strategy, I know that everyone is feeling much more empowered about 2022 than they were when this call started. At least I absolutely hope so, because again, without everybody working on this together, we can't do it. You know, America is a startup. We all have to. It's all hands on deck, and we're working hard together to make it happen. So your questions. We have, this is a good one from Instagram. Sella3891 wants to know what our plans are. Do we have any plans to combat fake news media outlets like Fox News?
Sure, I'll take that one. And then, Rick, please jump in. And I know Joe has some thoughts on this too. Yeah, yes is the answer. All day, every day, to the extent that anybody can keep up with the raft of sewage that spews from that part of the world on a daily basis. Just earlier this week, there's a guy named Jesse Waters who was on Fox News, and he said, "I love it when Joe Biden's upset. I want to do nothing but disrupt the American left. You know why? Because I think it's fun and it's good for our ratings." Guys, they say this stuff out loud. The things they believe in and the things they want to do, they say out loud. They have not been held to account. As Joe likes to note, this is not an organism that sprung up overnight, right? These are not outlets that just appeared out of nowhere. They've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. Rush Limbaugh started it. Fox News started it. It has metastasized into something far uglier and far more dangerous than any of us could have imagined. So yes, Fox is on the docket. Dan Bongino's on the docket. Lil Shapiro man is on the docket. They're all on the docket, right? None of them get a free pass in 2022. It's not disinformation. It's not misinformation. It's lies. That's what they do. They lie, they divide, and they incite violence and ugliness amongst Americans. Rick?
I just want to echo what Reed said about Fox and that ecosystem, that infrastructure on the right. Guys, one of the great secrets of all this stuff is they're completely full of shit. Okay. We look at Fox, it is the most powerful normative force in the Republican Party. It is also professional wrestling. You know, Sean Hannity is sending panicked text messages to Mark Meadows, begging Trump not to keep going on the insurrection. You know, Laura Ingraham, all of them, they know how bad their position is. They know how horrifying it is. That's one of the weak spots that's there. And so we're going to keep driving some wedges there. We're going to keep poking at Rupert. We're going to keep poking at Sean and the rest of the clown car, what I call the mutant parade at Fox. In part because it's difficult for Americans to get out of that bubble until they understand it's like professional wrestling. Once you know it's a big kayfabe, it's a big fake, it's a big lie, even the people that want to believe in it and feel confident in it start to get a little icky about it. Now, there are a lot of other outlets now that we're also going to be going after, like OAN, and I will say, Newsmax and OAN are for people who don't think Fox is fucking crazy enough, who can't get enough batshit crazy out of Fox on any given day. So they're also going to be under the gun a little bit, and we're also going to target a lot of their favorite people. Why are we going to do that? Why would we go after Marjorie Taylor Greene? Not because Marcus Flowers isn't a great guy, he's a great guy, but it's a tough seat. But if we attack them and we attack those people, they're going to turn their focus onto us, giving the opponents, the good guys, time to build up their money, time to build up their skills, time to build up their resources, time to mount a campaign that can be effective. So we're going to focus on that a lot. We're going to continue to focus on Facebook, which is, you know, one of the most problematic aspects of our current politics in this country, where if you want to ask yourself, why is America so divided? Why are we so fucked up as a nation? Mark Zuckerberg has a good bit to answer for in that regard. So yeah, we'll be keeping that fight up as we go through this year, in part because, you know, nobody else will really do it. They'll complain about it, they'll grumble about it, but, you know, we're willing to go and punch, you know, the multi-billion-dollar Fox enterprise in the face every couple of days, because it matters. It matters to keep them off balance. It matters. You know, fun fact, folks, there is one reporter at Fox who does nothing but report about us. It's the saddest job in America.
Or the greatest job.
Yeah.
Or the greatest job.
I just wanted to add one thing that they're getting back to what Reed said. You know, they built this outrage machine over 20, 30, 40 years. It with billionaires funding, funding it, and they built a direct connection with people who would spread that information out, spread the lies. First fall for the lies and then spread them. And one of the things, again, is we're gonna, I think, as Reed said, last year it sort of happened haphazard, or last cycle. This cycle, it's creating the tools that enlist you in becoming part of the comms core, the pro-democracy comms core. So as that content is out there, as we're coming out with content against the lies and taking it on, we've built a comms core, an army to spread those messages and to grow and amplify it, to fight this stuff, because there isn't going to be a billionaire that's going to do it. So far, no one stepped up.
But if there is, we'd love to talk.
Billionaire,
Yes.
watching the
Call
show.
us.
We will
Call
put it
us.
to work. We will kick the shit out of bad guys all day long.
But you know, if it's true, we have more, bigger social media presence than the DNC or the RNC. That's, literally millions of people out there. And if we can galvanize that, grow it, and actually enlist people in being part of the comms core that takes these lies on with the content that's being produced, I think we can put a real dent in it and take them on and beat them in 2022.
I agree wholeheartedly with this plan. We have another question from Loretta S. on Facebook. I'll start with you, Stewart, for this one. How are we going to bring Democrats and Never Trumpers together to realize the urgency in preventing Trump and Republicans from destroying our democracy?
Yeah, that's really the essential question, isn't it? I mean, I think the greatest danger is that we don't realize the greatest danger. And I think if we really believe that this is an existential threat to the country, it sort of changes how you look at everything. I mean, you take a piece of legislation like Build Back Better. I think it's very important, but whether or not that's going to be 1.6 trillion or going to be 2.2 trillion, that's not going to be remembered in 20 years. Whether or not 2024 is the last presidential election that resembles anything that we've known as a normal presidential election in our lifetime, that's what we're going to remember. And I think, you know, with all this talk, I was thinking about this, the central question that we're going to consider inflation more important than a threat to democracy is basically the mistake that the Germans made back in the 20s and the 30s. And we should be careful to put everything in perspective. So I think that really it's a matter of thinking about what's important. And this is our challenge. I mean, none of us get to pick history, but history can pick us. And I never thought I'd be here. I never thought that I would be calling the party that I work for an authoritarian force, but it is. And I think that we have to just look at this reality and not look away. Because on the other side, you know, there's a lot of buffoonish people over there, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Beaupart and Matt Gaetz, but this is not a buffoonish movement. These are very organized people. They're very well financed. They have propaganda wing and Fox and others. And if you look at history and read studies on how democracies die in modern times, Anne Applebaum's Great Twilight of Democracy, or How Democracies Die by those two Harvard professors, it usually isn't in violent coups. You get a violence like what happened on 1/6 as an element of it, but it's not tanks rolling out and circling television stations or circling Google. It dies at the ballot box and in the courtroom. And that's how Hungary has really ceased to be a liberal democracy. And it's why the right, like Republicans, why is Tucker Carlson broadcasting from Hungary? As Reese says, they say this stuff, just listen to them. Give them credit for at least being honest about what they believe that they want this country to be. And we have to just confront that. And if we believe the stakes are high enough, I think that people will put aside differences. Look, I spent, God, decades, you know, my life being ruined by Joe Trippi. He would show up in races. And like,
it was mutual. It's back and forth. Yeah.
Beat the crap out of me. But none of that matters now. And I look back at this stuff, like Rick was saying, you know, go back and I look at all these ads that we made about capital gains tax, or it all seems like quaint.
Right.
I mean, it's like worrying about your cholesterol count in a knife fight. I mean, really? You think that's what's important here? So I think that we have to just come together on what unites us, and put aside past differences. And if we don't, I think history is going to look back on this moment shamefully.
I do want to say one other thing, sort of echoing off that. You know, folks, the other side would love you to be in a state of constant despair. They would love for you to think nothing can be done, that it's over, the building's burned down, fuck it, we're screwed, we might as well stay home. They're doing that very deliberately. They're pushing that out every day. There are people in the Democratic side who are also very much acting like, you know, the show is over. This is not over. I'll tell you why. In every election, there's a moment, there's an opportunity, there's a space where you can open up a pathway that wasn't there before. You know, people have a difficult recollection of 2020, but remember, up until April of 2020, Donald Trump, the odds makers were basically putting Donald Trump at 5-1 odds to win. Didn't matter which Democrat it was. But the world changed underneath our feet when COVID and everything else started to erode Trump's position. We will be in a position, if this organization does its work properly and we have the support of folks like you, we'll be in a position to convert that moment into political momentum and political action and political victory as the time comes. This is a tougher year than Democrats would like it to be. It will always be that way throughout history. There have only been 3 years where the party in power hasn't won or hasn't lost seats. And one of those was an era that Stewart and I were very involved in 2002. But that was an election framed as a national security election. One of the jobs we think we can do very effectively is help craft those narratives, help build out that public dialogue. And when the moments come to open up on the Republicans for extremism and craziness and insurrection and lunacy and conspiracy and all that, we'll have a much better opportunity to hold the majorities in the House and Senate and to help win some critical governor's races, which are going to be very, very important in 2024 as we enter into an era where Donald Trump, whether he wins or loses, will declare that he has won.
And I'd just like to add that, look, I think Democrats in particular who are bleak about 2022 are not looking at 4 factors that I think make it clear to me that there's a real chance, not a real chance, a real, I think, a likelihood that we can pull off the 4th time in history and hold the House. One, early on this year, Dave Wasserman and as Reed talked about, they were looking at the redistricting numbers and were predicting that there would be a net gain just on redrawing of the lines of 10 seats for Republicans. Yeah. That isn't the case. In fact, it now looks like it may be a +4, could even be +6 for Democrats. Democrats have actually done a pretty good job at fighting for these the redistricting fight. We'll see. As Reed said, it could balance out, but at worst, it's probably going to be flat or even, not +10. Secondly, in 2020, we know millions more voted for Biden and Democrats in the Democratic ticket. We know all the name, who those people are, and a midterm is always a get out the vote. It's a total turnout election. It's where who turns out, and I believe with what we're building in the places that matter, we're going to have an impact on that, and you're going to have an impact on that, and we know who those people are and who we have to get out. Thirdly, they are going to nominate some real crazy people that are going to say crazy things. And as Rick pointed out, we will bang the drum on that and make them all pay for it, as we set the national agenda. And if you remember back when the Tea Party nominated a bunch of folks that were off the rails, it cost the Republicans the majority. They would have had the majority in the Senate. This will be, in my view, much worse, given how these people are fighting to be as Trumpy as they can, and which of them. Herschel Walker, a great example in Georgia. That seat is very much in play, and I think Warnock has an excellent shot at winning. Why? Because of not just his strength and who he is, but who they're nominating. This is going to happen around the country. The other thing, though, is who looks like the candidate core that's coming out, that's running on the Democratic side. You don't see a whole lot. There will be a couple of middle, moderate Democratic versus a progressive in a primary, but very few of them. The Democratic Party is really got some really incredible candidates, and it tends to be coalescing around them, except in a few areas. But I think, one, they're going to have some crazy candidates. Dems going to put better candidates up. We're going to exploit the foibles of their bad candidates, and the turnout differential without Trump on ballot. And I think redistricting is looking much better than people thought. I'm really actually pretty strongly bullish on if we all do our part, if we get the Coms Corps going, if we can grow this army to fight, we can win this.
Yeah, that was something I was very concerned about, because you guys know that my model was the Republicans, if the Democrats screwed it up, the Republicans would get 12 to 14 seats in redistricting. Yeah. And they have managed in a bunch of key states to not fuck it up.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Who would have guessed? But it's true.
Yeah, I think we're better storytellers and we have a better story to tell, and we
Right.
have truth on our side. And so I love your optimism, Joe. And I'm going to say when we do all those things, not if we do all these things, when language and words matter. And so I always try to remind people when we are going to do this, no matter what. It's incredibly important. Another question that we have here from Kathy T on Facebook. How can the Lincoln Project help congressional candidates in lopsided districts?
Well, let me say this. I mean, a lot, I mean, it's like, oh, well, there's only 50 swing seats in the whole country. On someone's schedule that, or, litmus test of things, that could be true. But there are going to be races out there that are going to surprise people, whether or not that's, a Republican seat or a Democratic seat. But I'll tell you this, if you don't run in more seats with good candidates than you need to win, then you won't get the requisite number of seats you need to win. And so I think, what we would like to do over the course, now that redistricting is pretty much put to bed, is say, okay, we have our core list of target seats that we're going to go after, which we will be sharing a lot of those things in the coming days and probably next week, is where are some of those places where we believe that all things being equal, as Joe noted, this crazy ass Republican might have, a registration advantage, but there's no, in a head-to-head fight against a, reasonable quality Democratic candidate, there's a chance that the Dem could win. So I think that we'll take a look at those things. Look, primary, filing deadlines are going to start clicking by here in the next, couple of weeks, months. And as we get deeper into the spring, we'll start to see some primaries. Texas is first in March, and then we have a bunch more in April and May. Some are very late, like Florida is not until August, I think, Rick.
End of August.
End of August, and New York is until September. And so we'll start to see how these things go. And the beauty of this also, too, gang, as you all know, is that because we're a very flat organization and you're looking at the people who make decisions, we can move on a dime. We did that in 20 when we were looking at specific areas of different target states that we thought we needed to compete in, whether or not that was like suburban Milwaukee and Wisconsin. We had to pull stakes out of North Carolina. The numbers showed we weren't going to win there. So we went and we took our resources and our work and we took it to Wisconsin. We'll be able to do that again too. Races will go on the board, they'll come off the board, and that'll go on all year. And so I think that's the key to doing this, is just understanding where some of those flyers are, and understanding what those Democratic candidates have to offer and just how cuckoo the Republican is.
Yeah, I think that is I think we're on it. We're on to something. I'm feeling pretty good after this. Honestly, I think for a lot of people, these first few days of 2022, everybody kind of stepped into it going like, oh, I don't know about this. But I really do truly believe that there are more of us who believe in working together to create a more perfect union than there are people who seek to destroy it. I believe that in my heart, and I know that we have the strategy to do it. That was the last of our questions, but we want to leave you with some final words. For me, I just want to say, stay energized, stay engaged, encourage more people to do the same, because we really do truly want to have a democracy. It's the foundation of everything. All of these other things that we think somehow matter right now, they're not going to matter if we don't have a functioning democracy. So that's my piece there. Guys, final words?
Rick, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Well, folks, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're going to be doing these town halls frequently. One of the things about the Lincoln Project is, someone said earlier, I think Stewart said earlier, we don't have a client other than America. We're not a special interest. We can't lobby for anything after this. We can't go out and sell access to a candidate. All we can do is fight the right fight. And we believe this is the most meritorious fight that's out there. We believe that fighting for democracy and fighting to protect and preserve this republic is the fight of our lifetimes. And we encourage all of you to stay involved. We want to keep giving people tools to stay involved and stay in the fight. We want to, again, thank you for everything. If you're inclined, you can go to lincolnproject.com/donate. We appreciate every donation. We put it to work. We put more of a higher percentage of our donations to work in voter contact than almost any other super PAC in the country. And we've got a track record that shows that we are an effective voice in a fight that is absolutely vital at this time. So I want to thank everybody. I will pass it on to Joe.
I just want to thank you all for being with us and remind you, look, you can build this movement. Find one more friend, one more coworker, one neighbor, get them to join us. And we've got to grow this thing much bigger than it is. It grew pretty big in the last cycle, but we got to really grow it for 2022 and build an army that can defeat this.
Well, I think we lost Stu, so I'll close this out. I want to say thank you again to Maya for managing this unruly crew this evening. I want to thank all the thousands of folks who joined us this evening for your dedication. Remember that we are a community. We don't do this, and we cannot do it without y'all. Also want to invite you. Remember that, I mean, it's hard to believe now, guys. We have 5 streaming shows a week: Monday and Friday at noon, Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Maya and Lisa host Wednesday at 7 p.m. We also have the Lincoln Project podcast. These are the ways that we communicate our messages. We have incredible guests. We do a lot of work that gets out to the ether. A lot of the stuff that we're going to do, as Joe noted, is going to be out in the States. I've been to some of these states so far and am just beyond impressed and blown away with the quality of folks and dedication that are out there. In coming weeks, please stay tuned. We will have more concrete ways that you all can get involved. We ask you to get involved because if we do this, guys, we will win that game, as Rick calls it, of small numbers, where these races are going to come down to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of votes. If we get our people out, we win. And what does winning mean? It means we save democracy and we get to fight another day. I just want to say thank you to everybody out there. Again, lincolnproject.us for all the information. At Project Lincoln on Twitter. You can find all our social media thing. I hope everybody has a healthy and safe new year, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, folks.